That's a them.
That's
That's
a
a them
them.
problem.
That's a
That's a
them
them
problem.
problem. That's a them problem.
That's a them
That's a them
problem.
problem.
That's a them problem.
That's a them problem.
That's a them problem.
That's a them problem.
Is this thing on? Of course it's on. I'll put it on. Welcome back to another episode of That's a Them Problem. We're already halfway through season 1 because this is going to be episode 5. I'm already going to tell you that this episode is going to be entitled I Took an Edible and Pressed Record because that's exactly what I did. I took it about not even like 10 minutes ago and I can already feel it kicking in. Shout out to Libs for leaving me two gummy candy things that are hella strong. I can't believe it's only been not even 10 minutes and like I'm already feeling it. Like I already feel it in my head. Crazy because like if you don't know, let me just tell you that I am a chronic marijuana smoker. I've been smoking weed since the end of matric, I would want to say. Yeah, the end of matric. And it started as very recreational. Also, again, I'm so sorry for the sound in the background. I wanted to record this episode with the mic and a professional DAW, but there's load shedding, and for some reason everyone wants to be making noise while there is load shedding. Also, people don't know what a DAW is. People who are not into sound engineering or like audio producing or anything. A DAW is a digital audio... No, I actually don't know what a DAW means, but I know that it's an application that you can like record and edit sound on. So like Fruity Loops is a DAW, Audacity is a DAW, Adobe Audition is a DAW. Take a shot every time I say DAW. Can you really tell that the edible is kicking in for real? It started as recreational and one of those things where I only smoked because I didn't buy my own weed and I would only smoke when I was around people or going out. And then I started buying my own weed. I guess the rest is history in the sense that like it became recreational into a self-soothing mechanism, into now what I would still consider recreational self-soothing mechanism. But at some point, I would say like last year, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to be the first stoner to say I was heavily addicted to weed. I'm going to use the word addicted. Because I could not eat without smoking, I could not sleep without smoking, I could not go outside without smoking, I couldn't go out with my friends without smoking. It became one of those things where like I had to do it before I could do anything. Because I was so in need of calm in my mind and in my body that like I still use marijuana as almost like a calm med for my anxiety. One thing that I say a lot when it comes to marijuana and like how I particularly use it is that like when I'm sober, I can't hear anything but noise. My mind is so loud, almost screaming at me. My body is extremely uncomfortable. I can feel my skin. Like this sounds really weird and it probably sounds like I'm high when I'm sober, but this is literally my reality is that like when I'm sober, I can feel the skin on my body. I can hear every single voice in my head and I can't feel the ground underneath my feet. I'm an air sign already. My entire spirit and existence belongs in the air and belongs in thought and belongs in the mind essentially, and because of that like it takes me a very long time and it's very difficult to ground myself in a lot of spaces, and that's something that I feel like I've been brought on this earth to teach myself is how to be more present. But the fact of the matter is that like when I'm sober, I can't feel the ground beneath my feet because I'm so caught up in my head, so caught up in the anxiety of living, that when I do smoke and when I started smoking, I could finally feel the ground underneath my feet to the point where I could finally think through things without having to create hyperbolic scenarios where obviously things will never turn out that way, but obviously I'm in that mind to over-prepare for the worst, even when the worst is hardly ever present. I feel like that's another topic for another day about how I am consistently just ready for the worst all the time. Wow, the edible is hitting. Fuck. But basically right now, I wanted to take this edible and do this podcast because I want to be as free flowing as possible for this episode. I want to be as authentic in myself right now without having to filter. I can even tell now while I'm talking that and like is not ever present in this conversation right now, which I'm very happy of. I'm not really self-conscious as much anymore of that. I think it's because this podcast has forced me to be aware of how I speak and how many times I say and like, which is crazy because today, okay, let's put it like this. Today is the 4th of September. This is obviously probably only going to come out at the end of September. And every episode until now, this episode, I've been paying attention to which topics I don't need to buffer on when I feel... I'm paying attention to when I feel more confident about how I speak and what I speak about. Also, I'm... in a weird way, this podcast is helping me realize that helping me realize that I actually have something to say. I know that in the first episode I said that I had a problem with starting this podcast in general because I felt like I didn't have anything important to say. But I have something to say. It might not be important, but already from the response that I've been getting from people who have been listening, this is inspiring them and this is comforting them, and that's honestly... wow, this edible is making me feel all types of shit because I want to cry thinking about that. I know how important podcasts are to me, especially when I'm going through things and feel like I'm drowning, and for some reason having a voice talking about some obscure thing that has nothing to do with me makes me feel more confident and not so alone. It also makes me realize that like my problems are a drop in the ocean comparatively to like the world at large, and it just brings me back to the point of feeling the ground underneath my feet again. In a very weird way, this whole experience, this podcast, this putting it together is bringing me back to earth in a way that I don't think I thought I could come back, if that makes sense. In all honesty, for the last 8 months, I've been praying, I've been hoping that at some point I won't need to resort to outside stimulus to keep me comfortable in my body and to keep me present in the moment. But I feel like in asking for that, that's why the podcast came. Because like I said, in many ways, this is bringing my mind and my body back to earth in a very strange way, and I'm so grateful for it. Oof, dude, I'm so sorry that you're listening to this and it's already so deep. It's only not even 10 minutes in and we're already so deep into this. What can I say? This is what an edible does to me. And I'm alone, so this is also kind of all in my head type thing. Also, even though I took an edible and I didn't smoke today, I really want to smoke because I think I'm actually not addicted to weed, I think I'm addicted to the act of smoking. And that I don't understand, to be quite honest. Ooh, let me tell you a story, actually. When I was growing up, my dad was an extremely heavy cigarette smoker, and I had this weird, doomsday feeling about it. I basically thought that every time my dad put a cigarette to his mouth, he was killing himself. And obviously, as a young little girl, looking at my dad, seeing the stick be put to his lips and thinking that every time he does that, he's going to kill himself, obviously I went through this, extreme idea of what smoking and vices in general are. And so I remember I think I was 10. I went to my dad, I took his box of cigarettes in front of him, and I broke every single cigarette in front of him. And I just want to say that, okay, I've smoked cigarettes before. I used to smoke cigarettes in first year. Thinking about breaking one cigarette is already pissing me off because of how expensive it is, and I could only imagine how irritated my dad would have been with me there literally breaking 20 cigarettes in his face. So that's how my history with smoking started, and then my dad kind of quit for a very long time and then started again later in life, and then I don't know what the fuck is happening with him now. But at some point during the time that he was not smoking cigarettes, I decided to try cigarettes for the first time. And I remember I stole one of one cigarette from my cousin who was living with us at the time. He had like a box of cigarettes. And I stole one. I took matches. I went around the house to the back where the Wendy house was. And I lit the cigarette. I lit my first cigarette. I think I was like 14, 15 at the time. And I was home alone. And I remember, because now thinking about it, I wasn't inhaling the cigarette at all. The first half of it, at least. I think that's the first cigarette that I ever smoked. I only inhaled like maybe one pull. And the rest I was just like fake puffing. And from that one pull, I felt like I was going to die because I immediately started coughing. And I put that cigarette down for a very long time until first year. So for between 14 years old and I literally turned 19 the first day that I started smoking. It was my birthday and I bought a box of cigarettes. That's another story we can get into. This is how bad my anxiety manifests when it comes to social anxiety and linking it into smoking. My first day of varsity, my first week of varsity, I didn't know anyone because I went to a university that was very far from my high school. And granted, there were like 2 people that I knew from high school that were there, but they had different classes, they had different degrees at that time. So I only saw them like maybe once a day for like an hour. And I remember the first week was like a very, very short week. It was about like 3 days from Wednesday to Friday, and Friday was my birthday. And Wednesday I got to campus, didn't know anyone, couldn't find the place I was supposed to meet, like the tour guides. And because of that, I went straight into the first shop that I saw on campus and bought a full box of Marlboro Switch. And I just started smoking. And I remember the first friend that I made on campus was a smoker because I was smoking by myself and I took out my lighter to light a cigarette, and this person I saw from the corner of my eye saw that I took out a lighter, and he ran to me and said, "Please, can I borrow your lighter?" And then he basically asked my name, and ended up being one of the people that I went to psychology lectures with for the first like week. And then he went MIA. I never saw him again. But and I continued to smoke cigarettes for the whole of first year. Like, I was a consistent smoker, would buy boxes. And then second year kind of slowed down. Third year, once in a while, I would only buy loose cigarettes. And now it's again like once in a blue moon. If I'm extremely stressed and can't find weed and I need to smoke in a public place, then I'll find a cigarette and then I'll smoke. But other than that, I don't really smoke cigarettes anymore. I will smoke a cigarette if I go out and I'm drinking, and even then, people that know me, I don't drink by choice. Like, drinking is not my first vice. Everyone knows that I would rather have a J over a shot or a cocktail or whatever. That's what she said. When I am out and when there is alcohol that I do partake in, I do smoke, because it's just one of those things. I feel like people who do smoke and drink know that like there's a certain like cap where you can't drink more without smoking, because it kind of like levels it out. Otherwise you just feel very like overwhelmed. I don't know, I feel like it brings the stimulus down so that you can ground yourself again, especially when you smoke after you drink. That's just me. I don't know how y'all deal with it, the people who do smoke and drink. I don't know how y'all feel, but that's one of those things. Crazy how the conversations are just going in and out of this whole thing. One thing I do want to mention, actually, I wanted to do a whole episode on not drugs, because like I haven't done like hectic drugs. If anything, the only thing I've done ever is weed and shrooms. And I wanted to do an episode called "They Might Have a Drug Problem." Obviously, I mentioned this in the previous episode, in episode 3, I think, where it's not about actually having a drug problem, having an addiction rather, but more having the fascination of firstly partaking in drugs and then progressing into this idea of addiction and of this need to consistently be separate from the reality that you feel, essentially. I want to say that this is me not encouraging drug use. This is not me encouraging marijuana use unless you're over 18 and you feel like you want to do it. I'm saying that before I started smoking, I had a very apparent lack of awareness. I was not aware of how my body felt. I was not aware of how preoccupied with other people I was not aware of how much I kept in me. And so when I started smoking weed and started having not bad trips per se, but I started becoming extremely self-aware of how I was feeling when I was high and what I was thinking about when I was high, how I would feel and think after it, I realized how, firstly, I really didn't give a fuck about myself. I also was extremely loud. I didn't know how to present myself in the best way possible. This is all how I kind of perceived myself before smoking. I was very ignorant of social set. Now that I think about it, I feel like I wasn't ever socialized. I wasn't socialized to be social. I hope that fucking made sense. But like, I wasn't socialized to be in group settings where it was calm and positive and the energy was flowing. Like, I didn't even know that I could hold energy, or I didn't even know that my energy had so much power, right? That's how like unaware of myself I was. And then when I started smoking and I started buying my own weed, I started realizing, firstly, how bad I feel when I get a bad trip. Essentially, like, when I'm extremely... I remember the story. Obviously, I started smoking end of matric. I remember I bought weed. Where did I buy this weed? I feel like I bought this weed after school. My dealer met me outside near the park. My dealer met me at a park near our school. That was like not even like 500 meters outside the school. And I bought it and I rolled up at the park and I smoked by myself, but I was around my friends and I had to Uber home. And I remember I was so fucked up in the Uber. No, I was so fucked up by the time I got to the Uber. No, actually, fuck that. Let me even start from the beginning. I smoked. I like 2 pulls in, I was immediately paranoid. I could feel in my heart and in my body that this was going to be an extremely bad trip. And this was still when I was trying to figure out like how much I should smoke. Like, this was the first time that I smoked by myself, but I was still around people. And ordering the Uber took forever and a fucking day. The Uber took long to get there. When I got into the Uber, I was so fucking high. And then the Uber driver still turned around and said, "Hey, my GPS is not working. Please, can you direct me to your house?" And I was about like 15 kilometers away from home, and I still had to like direct him through like the highway. And I just remember being so stressed out. And I still had to get back to where I was living, which was like an apartment complex situation thing. And I still had to stay with my friend who was like living under, so it was like a duplex thing. So my mom and I lived at the top, and then my friend and her mom lived at the bottom. And I remember I still had to go stay by them because my mom had the keys. So I had to be dealing with not only my friend but my friend's mom, who, God bless her soul, I love her. She's the most strict but fun mom I've ever met, where she'll like, I didn't mind that she called me on my shit, but back then I was very offended, obviously. But basically, I showed up to the house. I was still high as fuck. The mom looked in my face and said, "Are you high?" And I said, "No." And then she said, "Yes, you are, because one of your eyes are drooping." And I just remember the dysphoria. Because mind you, I already have an issue with my face. And I love how like topics are going in and out. I have an issue with my face. The right side of my face, I personally feel, is not my most beautiful or pretty side, because I feel like there's a lot more space between my features. And also the right side of my face is slightly lower than the left side of my face. It's a whole thing, and I was already very self-conscious about that then. So when she said that to me, the first thing that I wanted to do was cry, because it's like, wow, are you just telling me that my eyes droopy because the one side of my face is already like slightly off? Or is it that I was so fucked up that like the one side of my face was literally like hanging? Anyway, safe to say that my friend's mom didn't tell on my mom that I was high, because my mom didn't know that I was smoking at that point. I feel like my mom only found out that I was smoking weed when I was like 21, 22 maybe. So it's still kind of new to her, but she doesn't really give a fuck because it doesn't really affect me negatively, at least not in a way that she can see, right? Because I can obviously tell and feel where my smoking habits are kind of detrimental to me. Crazy. But anyway, that's weed. And then when it comes to shrooms, I've done shrooms, I want to say, about 4 times now in my life. 4 or 5. I think it's 4 or 5. I don't actually remember. I need to count. Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Actually, I've done shrooms about, like, I would say 7 times. Fuck. And 2 out of the 7 I've done by myself. Out of the 7, I've only had 1.5 bad trips. I say 1.5 because 1 was an extremely bad trip, and then half because it was a trip that I did by myself. It was horrible and a bad trip at the beginning because I took the shrooms and I stayed in my room with the door closed. And essentially I got claustrophobic, and that made me extremely paranoid. And then when I left my room and I basically like went for a walk outside, I felt so much better, and like the trip kind of like made it way better. But one thing that I personally like gravitate towards going back to tripping on shrooms is, firstly, there's no, at least in my experience, there's no room for what if thoughts. There's no room for prepare this thoughts. There's no room for anxiety stricken thoughts. Like, the only thing that you can think about in those moments, at least in my experience, is, oh my goodness, like I can feel the wave coming. Because essentially to me, I feel like taking shrooms comes in waves of energy. So like one moment it'll be really calm and like the waves are like, you know, low tide, and like you can feel how warm the sun is, and you can see the wind move in the air, and you can like see patterns in the sky and shit. And then the wave comes and it almost feels like this adrenaline rush like move through your chest, and then all of a sudden you're just so energetic and you want to like walk around and you want to like listen to music. It's to me, it's, this is not going to make sense, but to me, taking shrooms feels like a hike, but not like a mountainous hike, more like an open park, flat road hike. You know what I'm saying? Also, I feel like the most beautiful moments I've had have been on shrooms. I remember we were at Sun City. Yeah, we were at Sun City, and we were the only people there because it was like during June, so it was kind of cold, whatever, and people weren't there. But the sun was still so warm, and I remember being in this like garden near the palace. There was music playing in the background, the sun was so warm, and there was like these little yellow flowers on the floor, and there were like butterflies like on these little flowers. And I remember the music playing in the background, and I was just like dancing like on the grass and whatever, and these butterflies started like flying around me and like basically like stepping around, like not stepping but like moving around these little flowers that were around me. That particular moment of like saying and feeling and seeing the butterflies like move around me and saying the butterflies are dancing with me, I think that's the crux of what I feel, at least in my experience being on shrooms, on is that you are so one with everything in the world. You are flat just like everything else. I don't know if that makes sense. That's gonna sound so fucked up, but essentially like you feel like you are not separate from the trees around you and from the ground underneath you and from the wind that's blowing through you. You finally feel a part of, at least for me, you finally feel a part of something and not pulled out and separated from something. I feel like shrooms in a weird way soothes that feeling for me of like being isolated and separated. It like fills that space and makes me feel like I'm actually a part of something. But also it every time I take a trip and then I come back from it, I always learn more about myself, and I always feel like I've either dealt with an emotion that I've been struggling to get to, or I finally have found a little bit of joy in normal life again that I can carry on until the next trip happens. And mind you, in these like 7 times that I've done shrooms and done trips and whatever, it hasn't been like this weekend, next weekend, the weekend after. No, it's been like 5 months in between, 6 months in between, 7 months in between, because I don't want to become reliant on shrooms to be the catalyst to my next evolution in self, if that makes sense. Even though majority of the big points that have moved me into the person that I am now has come out of having trips and having bad trips at that. Yeah, man, it's just one of those things that I feel if you are open to, firstly, taking shrooms, smoking, taking a trip with whatever, people are taking trips with, it needs to not come from a place, at least in my experience and in my life relationship with drugs. Let's talk about that. In my life and my relationship with drugs, right? And obviously when I mean drugs, I mean weed and shrooms. In my relationship with these drugs, I need to know that firstly, I can't be using these things from a place of need and from a place of escapism anymore, because I realize now that not that I have an addictive personality, but I have an escapist personality. If I'm going through an extremely rough time, or if something triggers me in normal day-to-day life, like if my mom says something and it really hits me hard in my heart and I have to hold myself to not get angry or to not shout or to not raise my voice, I immediately bolt for outside and start smoking, because I know that when I smoke, that feeling of anger just dissipates. And I already know that that's a problem, because I need to learn how to sit with uncomfortable feelings, because unfortunately smoking takes away those uncomfortable feelings. I don't want to be in my late 40s or 50s still having to run to the self-soothing mechanism, and when for whatever reason I don't have resource to that thing, then I am 40 years old sitting uncomfortably in my body and in my mind. I don't want to do that. That's why I've also been praying to kind of ease off of needing to self-soothe. But guys, let's just be honest, having a body, having memories, having trauma, having intrusive thoughts is so hard. It's so difficult. It's so painful. And I feel that fortunately, unfortunately, I've been given the space and the capacity to feel extremely deeply about everything. And it's kind of, I'm going to get a little deep and intrinsic. I feel like what a blessing it is and how beautiful it is to experience things at such a high level of intensity. It's beautiful, having to experience joy at the highest intensity, having to experience love at the highest intensity, having to experience sadness and loss and grief at the highest intensity is honestly the feeling that I feel carries through throughout my life, is this bittersweet feeling, because it's beautiful. At its core, it's beautiful, but it's bitter because you still feel the lowest of lows, the pit of loneliness, the abyss that is isolation of oneself. And so I feel in a lot of ways, because there's no in-between when it comes to how I experience things and how I feel things, I'm constantly left with this idea that my life is just bittersweet. Wow, so deep, so tragic, I'm so sorry. But essentially what I'm saying is that there's so many moments in my life that I can pinpoint that are so extremely beautiful. And at the same time, with equal amounts of space in my heart and equal amounts of damage, there are really fucked up things and really sad things that have happened. Sadly, when good things happen to me, I can't fully experience the joy anymore, because I'm so aware of the fact that there's a bitterness behind everything that I experience and feel. I'm so sorry for getting emotional. I just feel, wow, this edible said I'm gonna take you everywhere. Fuck's sake. But that's kind of where my existence, I feel, lives, is this bittersweet hill where there are great achievements but equally devastating disappointments. Let's do a brain chart, right? Weed is a downer, but people obviously use it recreationally and think that it's not an upper and not a stimulant. Well, actually, people think it's a stimulant because people think that when they smoke, they're going to have, bodily sensations and, they're going to trip, whatever. But it's a downer. I would say after a very extended, long use of... Basically, been smoking for almost 4 years now. Especially when I'm down bad, I feel and understand why marijuana is a downer. Because sometimes I can be extremely low and I'll smoke and it will take me to the fucking pit. It will take me down to the last floor of the elevator, dog. And I wonder why when I get there and when I start feeling that, I immediately start regretting smoking because I'm like, bro, I was already uncomfortable at ground floor being sober. And I thought that smoking would just take... I was just asking for like level 1. But now this bitch has taken me to LG. And now I'm contemplating... Not even contemplating. Now I'm thinking of all the reasons why my life is shit, I need to start balancing how many times I think my life is shit with like 10 minutes of gratitude. Let me even do it now. I'm grateful that I can talk about shit like this. Not to anyone, but to whoever's listening. And I appreciate you for holding space for me right now. Because I would have already clocked out from the time my voice broke, thinking that I was going to cry. But I lost my train of thought. You see now? Trust Nick to lose their train of thought when things are getting extremely deep. Let's just move on. I asked people on the That's a Them Problem Instagram, what is the random hill that you will die on? I kind of wanted to do unpopular opinions and hot takes. And one thing I got 4 responses, so thank you to the people that responded to me, and then I have 2. But we'll go through them and then we'll call it a day. Okay, so the first one I have is procrastination. I'll do that till my last breath. Same. Same. Okay, I have this thing where if I'm doing work right now, I will overextend myself to finish more work that I need to do right now so that if I do want to procrastinate tomorrow, I can. And I remember when I was still in varsity studying, when it came to like tests and assignments, I had to procrastinate and leave it till last minute. Because guess what? I don't have any motivation or any reward to possibly do it the moment it's given to me. And I know that I can hyperfixate and focus hours at a time if I procrastinate until the last minute. So studying, even if it was for an exam, I needed at least 5 days before I need to start studying at least 5 days before the exam. I won't lie, some of that shit never helped. I did kind of struggle. But then I realized that like from the time I'm given the date of the exam, I have to at least write notes. Like I have to write out study notes. And then I won't look at them until 5 days before the exam. And then I'll look at them because now it's notes that I've written and notes that I can understand with my own shorthand. And then that's how I kind of like graduated almost cum laude. Thanks, criminology, for fucking me in the ass for my last exam. Anyway, the next one is vanilla is the superior flavor. There, unpopular opinion, I'm gonna have to say, because I don't agree. I am going to say obviously chocolate is the superior flavor because it's chocolate, dog. Come on. It's chocolate. For the gays, that's for you. I kind of understand. I mean, a good vanilla anything is really, really good if they know how to do it. But also, chocolate anything? Come on. The next one we have is forgiveness is misrepresented and not forgiving doesn't mean that thing... What? And not forgiving does not mean the thing will eat you up forever. Oh, shit. Dude, okay. I agree. Forgiveness is misrepresented, yes. And I feel like in the way that society and at least social media makes it seem, at least to me, is that forgiveness is... Okay, pun. I know, or at least I've been taught that forgiveness is for yourself, right? You forgive those so that you yourself don't harbor that energy in your heart and in your body, right? But then unpin, getting back to how society and how social media makes it seem, is that you forgiving someone, you're giving them the pass. You're giving them the leeway to kind of leave the courtroom, if that makes sense. And that's fucked up because people really think about that, and then when people are forgiven, then they start running again and doing shit. Also, not forgiving someone, yeah, Actually, no. Not forgiving someone is not going to taint your soul or bring your soul down or, you know, like make it worse for you to like heal or like move through it. If a person has got you so fucked up, you have no reason to forgive them. Especially if they haven't done anything to prove to you that they are apologetic, that they are sorry, that they are deserving of your forgiveness. I believe in that one. And then the last one from the people that sent in things were, coffee and a cigarette is my hill of death. Amsterdam breakfasts at any time of the day are extremely beautiful, I won't lie. For those who don't know, Amsterdam breakfasts are a coffee and a cigarette, a coffee and a J. Basically a coffee and a smoking apparatus. So if you vape, then your Amsterdam is a coffee and vape. And I agree. Amsterdam breakfasts are great, especially if you're in a rush, especially if you have shit to do and you're not hungry in the morning. I by all means believe in an Amsterdam breakfast for real. I think I'm gonna give one unpopular opinion that I have maybe, and then we'll call it a day. I have two. My unpopular opinion is that peanut butter is ass and you can't tell me anything to make it seem or taste better. I don't give a fuck. Peanut butter tastes like ass. I don't know how people eat peanut butter sandwiches. I don't know how your stomach like keeps that shit in. But I pray for y'all. I do pray for y'all. And my last unpopular opinion is that stoners are lazy and uneducated. Guys, the most educated people I've ever met smoke a fuck ton of weed. The most educated people I know, actually I have a friend who is, I don't know if I can say this. He was studying to be a doctor. He isn't anymore. But he's growing like indoor for him. He's not selling. He's growing indoor for himself, basically. Like he supplies himself, but then he has another job. I mean, he used all that brain power to make sure that he didn't ever have to go to a pharmacy again. And he's one of the most healthiest people I know. So yeah, the next time, especially people who don't smoke and don't understand stoner culture, we're not lazy. We're not uneducated. If anything, we're having the deepest conversations between ourselves. Yeah, we might be lazy, but like, mind your fucking business. Heavy. I just want to say thank you to everyone who listened to this episode. We are basically halfway through season 1. I can't believe it. I genuinely thought that this would be, like, this whole journey of the podcast would be a heavier load to carry. That's what she said. But it's actually going pretty well, and I'm enjoying. I look forward, like I say, I look forward to creating episodes and filming and making visuals and getting guests on. It's a hobby that I'm glad I found outside of the things that I already do as just like a normal thing in my life. I'm glad that it's separate from my art and my music. It's separate from my work, and it's separate from my feelings, because a lot of times like I have to separate how I feel about certain topics to actually talk about them, you know. So I just want to thank you for giving me space to do this, because without you listening to this whole energy exchange, this whole prompt of energy that pushed me to do this would essentially be for nothing. And I am nothing without my community. I am nothing without this podcast that now has created now a new community for me. So with that being said, I just want to say thank you to listening again, and until next time, bye.